Penguin Random House Audio presents Ends of the Earth, Journeys to the Polar Regions in Search of Life, the Cosmos, and Our Future, by Neil Shubin. Read for you by Fred Berman. To my colleagues on polar expeditions, remembering the times we shared and all we learned. Prologue. Hunched inside a small propeller plane, with my knees pressed against a pallet of tents, food, and fossil-collecting gear, I felt I could almost touch the icebergs below as the coast of Greenland emerged in the distance. It was July of 1988, and I was the lone student, a novice in camping and fieldwork, teamed up with 3 veteran field paleontologists on a hunt for early dinosaurs in East Greenland. Our plane began the flight at a massive airstrip at a naval air station outside of Reykjavik, where it was dwarfed by aircraft taking off to monitor Soviet submarine activity in the area. Designed to land on unpaved landing strips or patches of tundra in remote Arctic valleys, the plane flew so slowly that I feared it might fall out of the sky. Once over our Greenlandic target, the pilot was hard at work looking for a safe landing spot amid tundra and rock. He banked the plane in a valley bordered by ice-capped red and green mesas and buttes, hunting for a 1,500-foot-long area free of rocks where he could set down. As the plane made steep turns, the cliffs ahead filled the windshield. Seeing our pilot's mane of gray hair brought a strange sense of comfort as I clung to both my seat and the adage, "There are old bush pilots and there are bold ones." After 3 or 4 passes, he performed mock landings by touching tires to tundra to test the stability of the ground. Mud, large hummocks of tundra, and boulders are the bane of bush landings in the Arctic. Eventually satisfied with his choice, he brought us to the ground, with bumps and shimmies that shook items loose around the cabin. The pilot had to depart quickly because of the threat of bad weather on his return, so we unloaded our gear in an impromptu bucket brigade. I was already covered with mud, while our pilot, who did more than his fair share of lugging, stood pressed and clean. The roar of the plane on his departure marked the beginning of our new life for the next 6 weeks. Rocks, ice, and polar wildlife, along with the research we were there to do, were now our entire world. Science in the polar regions means confronting emotional, physical, and logistic challenges in order to ask fundamental questions about the past, present, and future of life and our planet. Since I've proceeded from that rookie experience in Greenland to lead my own expeditions in the Arctic and Antarctica over the past 3 decades, my original trepidation has been replaced with gratitude for the privilege of working in some of the most extraordinary landscapes on Earth. How many times can you work in places that few, if any, humans have ever encountered before? And to do that exploration in the service of understanding the fundamentals of our world and the ways it came to be? For European cultures, polar science began as a nationalistic enterprise, driven by attempts to achieve or exploit the points farthest north or south. The race for the poles, or for the discovery of a northwest passage connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, pitted nations against one another in often tragic attempts to be the first to arrive at a certain destination on the globe. Scientific discoveries emerged as teams mapped these regions and studied the natural history, peoples, and climate of the new terrain. Despite competition, much of our current scientific understanding of polar regions ultimately arose from international collaborations that were unique in their breadth and altruism. Starting in 1870, scientists declared occasional international polar years, when researchers from different countries would form collaborations on geological and meteorological studies at the poles. During the International Polar Year of 1957 to 1958, scientists used modified rock drilling equipment to core into the ice of Greenland and Antarctica. This effort brought the leaders of many different countries to the bargaining table, where they went on to craft an extraordinarily broad and forward-thinking international agreement, stating that the sole purpose of any nation's use of Antarctica is for scientific discovery alone. The Antarctic Treaty was signed by 12 nations in 1959. The entire continent became a domain for scientific research rather than a reserve for individual countries or their militaries. Such an agreement was impossible for the Arctic because, unlike Antarctica, much of its territory was already claimed by different nations. While nations and private entities inevitably jockey with one another over Antarctic resources and territory and try to game the treaty for their own interests, nobody could have predicted the impact of the scientific discoveries that would ultimately emerge. In this book, Polar Science will be our lens to see the natural world and the extraordinary ways we have come to know it. We will see how work in the Arctic and Antarctica reveals profound connections among oceans, climate, and all living beings, a delicate network that will shape the coming centuries on our planet. Ice has come and gone for billions of years and, in the process, has sculpted our world and paved the way for the origin of our species. Changes to the poles reveal how topography, climate, and life can change dramatically, often in the blink of an eye in geological time. Here, the astonishing adaptations of living creatures to extreme conditions reveal how life may have arisen and how it responds to extreme climates. And inside the ice, meteorites that fell millennia ago reveal glimmers of the earliest moments of our solar system. Ever since humans first set foot on polar landscapes, scientific insights have been gained by researchers often isolated in small field camps or stations, living in environments that can freeze flesh in minutes and jury-rigging failed equipment to keep life and work going in adverse conditions. Scientific discovery itself has become the product of another kind of science, that of polar exploration. Success comes from employing techniques and ideas developed by indigenous peoples who first settled the region thousands of years ago, and the European explorers who followed them centuries later. Across time, humanity has expanded its knowledge of the world at the poles through endurance, resilience, serendipity, and tragedy. Antarctica and the Arctic are warming, and polar treaties are straining as fast as ice melts and species disappear. Our fragile window for understanding the cosmos, the planet, and ourselves is closing. The science of Earth's most remote places and the stories of the people who work there are becoming ever more urgent and relevant. Once on the ground in 1988, we did not have much time to savor the view. With the changeable polar weather, our first need was to establish shelter. Following the lead of my three companions, Farish, Chuck, and Bill, I started to break out the tents and gear, rummaging through supplies to find ropes, hammers, and tent stakes. Each of the three had a role to play. Farish, the senior professor and former Marine, made the executive decisions. Bill, the experienced field hand, could do everything from cooking a shrimp etouffee in a desert sandstorm to dressing suppurating wounds in the kitchen tent, while Chuck had the keenest eye for seeing fossils amid a field of rocks. My role, beyond bringing a library of Barry Lopez books, volumes on polar history, and field guides to birds, was not obvious. With tents erected and supplies cinched down, the reality of my situation started to emerge. My relationship to the natural world had been formed 3,000 miles south, surrounded by the greenery of plants and the cycle of dark nights and sunlit days, as well as ready access to other people, food, and medical care. In this new landscape,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?